Welcome to Beyond the Microphone, a podcast about podcasters and the stories of how their shows came together, grew, and what they've discovered along the way. I'm your host, Adam Baruh. So thanks for listening to our first episode. Before we get into our interview with our guest today, I'd like to share a little bit about how this podcast came together. I used to host a podcast called The Change that was focused on servant leadership, mental health, burnout, and anxiety, and that show grew out of my own healing journey as I was struggling to balance my role as CEO of an IT consulting agency and parenthood and processing through some legacy trauma that had presented itself at the beginning of the pandemic. With The Change, I was able to meet and support numerous podcasters and others who are working hard to normalize mental health conversations and strive to make an impact in our collective psyche and healing journeys. And the format of this show is going to be quite different. It was born out of the experience with The Change. And, really what I found was the podcasting community and people I've met were so incredibly supportive and collaborative, and everyone is driven by passion and purpose. So what I'm hoping to achieve with Beyond the Microphone is educating for existing as well as beginning podcasters, what it takes to put a podcast together, what that journey is like. And I want to explore those stories about how, people's podcasts got started, what motivated them to get started, and also, share any tips and insights that podcasters that I'm going to be speaking with have learned along the way so that others that listen to this podcast can benefit and find support to get success in their own podcasting journey. So without further ado, let's get into it. Our guest today is Molly Sider, who I met through the Grow the Show program. And as members of the Accelerator program, we have access to an inner circle community where podcasters can share ideas, ask questions. It's a forum. So, really nothing is a stupid question there. And everybody is really helpful and collaborative and supportive. And Molly had sent a community post looking for people to really just collaborate with in any way whatsoever. I think you had, asked to do things like trailer swaps, guest swaps, et cetera. So Molly, welcome to Beyond the Microphone.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. And, real world podcasting for people that are listening, that are just starting out, you're going to run into some technical stuff 100% along the way. So Molly can't see me right now, or she couldn't see me at the beginning. We're recording on a platform called Riverside, which I absolutely love. And we do all of our podcasts on EIQ Media using Riverside. And I don't often run into technical stuff. So Molly's just going to pretend she can see me here today, even though we are releasing the video ultimately on YouTube. So she'll see it then. But all right, so you got a podcast called I Am This Age, which is proof that you're never too late, you're never too old, and where you encourage people to go do that thing they're always talking about. So before we get into that, why don't we start with the basics? Who are you? Give us some detail about yourself, where you live, and ultimately what led you into podcasting and starting your show.
Okay. Well, I'm Molly, and I live in Chicago. And let's see, where do I even begin? I was a longtime wine professional in New York and in Chicago, and then during the pandemic, left that industry. And around that time had been thinking about starting this podcast. So the podcast, I Am This Age, came from this idea. Well, it was as I was approaching the age of 40, because I interview people who are over the age of 40. I was approaching 40 and I was sort of panicked that I wasn't where I thought I should be at that age. I was still in my career, still liking it, but also had a little bit of a hunch that I wasn't going to want to do it for the rest of my life, because it's not like the healthiest lifestyle, as fun as it is. And I was out of a, not great situationship, for lack of a better word.
Situationship,
a situationship, relationship, kind of.
Yeah.
Never married, no children. And I was really panicked, like, oh my God, I'm going to be 40 and what have I done? Like, I've missed my chance. And I was always really into listening to podcasts. And so I was searching for representation and stories from people who were older than me, who were living outside of the normal box or making big changes later in life. And were finding, happiness or their version of happiness and success and just like loving life anyway. And I could not find it in podcast form anywhere. And I was like, oh, surely I'm not the only person out there feeling this way or needing this content. So I guess I'm just going to have to start my own podcast.
Yeah.
But also I had no idea how to do that.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. So like, yeah, how, and everybody kind of experiences this, and, unless you're in broadcasting or performing, like, how do you even know where to start? I mean, it's not just, coming up with the concept, but then there's the whole technical part of like putting it all together. So how did you kind of navigate through that part of it?
Yeah. So I feel like everybody these days is like, I want a podcast. And obviously I was one of those people. And I think a lot of people, including myself, do not understand how much work it is and all that entails making a podcast. It's a lot. So I had the idea first, of course, and I sat on it for a really long time because, again, I did not know how to make a podcast. I don't consider myself particularly techie, and I didn't have any idea where to begin. So I started by just telling people the idea just to like see what people thought. And also because, I don't know, it just was something that I needed so badly that I couldn't not talk about it. And so I talked about it to everybody I knew, and everybody who heard about it, who was like, my age, even younger people were like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. I need that also. You need to make this. And so it just was motivating to be like, all right, I got to figure this out. But also I'm terrified because, again, like no clue where to start. Luckily, I have a really good friend who works in like the marketing world, and he runs a studio here in Chicago, and he's a photographer and a videographer, and just like has all that knowledge, or at least knows where to find it. And he was like, all right, this is what you need to get. You need to get like this microphone. You need to get, these XLR cables, and you need to get a recorder. At this time I was using a little Zoom recorder. And like, I didn't know what any of those things were. I'm like, what? Like, what's an XLR cable? I didn't even know. So he like took me to he took me to a store. He took me to I can't remember the name of the store, like the Guitar Center.
Okay. Yeah.
And we like went and we got, a Zoom recorder, like I used a Zoom recorder there and just a bunch of stuff. And then I got it and I bought it. I spent all this money and then I just didn't do anything with it. Because again, I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this stuff.
When was this, by the way? Because like, Zoom recorder, I mean, you're not using that thing anymore. I mean, now there's, tools.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not using a Zoom recorder anymore unless I travel. It's awesome to have if you're traveling because they're really tiny and, don't require much and easy just to like pack in your suitcase or whatever. So it's nice to have them around if you want to travel with a podcast. But this was in 2019.
Okay.
The first episode, I ended up reaching out to a friend of mine's mom who has a wonderful story. She's a world champion Ironman in her age bracket in her 70s. And She didn't start like running marathons until her late 40s and didn't learn how to swim until after her first triathlon, which was in her 60s. She did not know how to swim. And she's badass, obviously. She's like won the Ironman Hawaii. She's won a bunch of times. And she's got a great story. And I knew her because I grew up with her daughter. And so I reached out to her, and she lives in the suburbs of Chicago, and she was willing to come drive into the city. And I used my same friend who runs the marketing studio. He let me use his studio. Like we went in there on like a Saturday. It was like a snowy April day. And he set up like this makeshift studio. I used his really fancy, very expensive microphones. He was like, do not drop these. They're very expensive. And honestly, they aren't the best microphones because the purpose is not for podcasts. So it picks up like lots of like noise, ambient noise and stuff like that. But that was the first episode. And then I sat on that episode for a year and a half and I did not publish it. I didn't do anything with it because I was like, well, where am I going to find a second episode? And I don't even know. Like, it's just so like overwhelmed with like,
Yeah.
how do
Oh,
you
well,
even
let's
do
stop with
this?
that episode. Like, how did you even prepare for that? What, like, did you script what you wanted to ask? Like, just if you could go back and remember, like, even just putting that first episode together,
Yes.
what did you work off of? Like, what
Oh
were
my.
you modeling off of?
Well, okay. So good question. I modeled it off of mostly how I built this with Guy
Mm-hmm.
Raz,
Yeah. Love
which
that.
I feel like is pretty popular amongst podcasters. Um, I also am a huge armchair expert fan with Dak Shepard. And so the like vulnerability piece I really picked up from him, where I was like, I want this to be like a conversation. I want to be able to share some of, my experiences in
Mm-hmm.
life. It was more how I built this in style, like
Yeah.
setting up the question by giving a little bit of a backstory, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Which now I do over voiceovers, but then I was doing it like within the episode. I didn't know how to, at the time, I didn't think about like what's like the main question I want answered. Like I knew kind of like broadly. And she had a bunch of change stories. Like she, went back and started working after her 40s and stuff like that. So we covered everything. The episode is an hour and a half long. It's unedited because I didn't know how to edit at the time. And she's a wonderful story, but I was just talking about this last night. Like I think about maybe how I should go back and edit it and put it out how I put out my episodes today, because it's such a wonderful story, but like way too long. And also if I did it today, I would pick like one topic. I wouldn't want to like cover all of, because some people just have a lot. Yeah, some people have a lot of different change stories, and it's like, no, pick one.
Yeah.
Focus on one.
Totally.
But I am still to this day, like extremely prepared. Like I'm preparing for an interview this afternoon with Kristen.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I always like will make an outline of the questions that I want to ask. And even I'll throw in some things that I might want to like include of my own personal story, just to remind myself. I otherwise get super, super I love speaking in front of people, but only if I'm super, super prepared and know exactly what I'm going to say.
Hey there, fellow podcasters. This is Tori Barker of the Creative Visionaries Podcast, and I'm excited to introduce you to Podtask, the all-in-one platform designed to streamline your workflow and take your show to the next level. If you're tired of feeling overwhelmed by the tasks required to manage your podcast, then check out Podtask, where you can easily streamline your podcasting process and simplify your workflow. Say goodbye to the stress of managing multiple tasks and deadlines, and hello to a more efficient and productive podcasting experience. And it doesn't just stop there. Podtask also offers AI-based marketing tools that give your podcast a competitive edge. As a fellow podcaster, I know from experience how important it is to have a reliable and efficient tool like Podtask to keep you on track. It helps save me so much time in post-production, which allows me to focus on what really matters, creating great content for my listeners. So if you're ready to take your podcast to the next level, head over to podtask.com and sign up for a free forever plan and get started today.
What really happens to us when we die? There is growing evidence that suggests we never really die, but that our eternal souls take a journey from this earthly plane to the afterlife over and over again. Join me, Kristen Taylor, host of How I Made It Through, as I interview psychic mediums and those who have had near-death experiences, as they share insights about why we are here and what we can expect when we transition to the afterlife.
So at what point did you find for yourself that comfort zone? Where you started to feel, okay, no, I got this. Like I got this. I'm actually like doing well with this, and I feel good about it.
I mean, I still get nervous, but I definitely maybe just in the past. Okay, so I should back up and just say real fast. When I did the first episode and I sat on it for a year and a half and I finally released it because I had a coach helping me coach, like she was basically coaching me through like, what would it feel like? Why are you sitting on this? Why aren't you doing anything with it? What would it feel like to just release this episode like tonight? And the reason why I had so much trouble releasing it and putting it out to the world was because I was like, it's not going to sound like, it's not going to sound like How I Built This or Armchair Expert. Like those are like produced.
Okay.
They have money behind it. They have people, who have specific jobs. And this is just me. And I'm new to this and I don't know what I'm doing. And how can I possibly put an episode out or put a show out there that's not going to sound perfect?
Yeah.
And also, how will I find more people? Like, I don't know how to find more guests right now. And I had to really give myself permission to obviously make a podcast that sounds the best to my ability and let go of the like perfection piece of it, but also to put out an episode whenever I had one, because ultimately I was making this podcast for me because it was content that I really needed. And I just had a hunch that if I needed, somebody else would too. And I was also like, I'm not trying to make money doing this. I just want to I want to help myself and I want to help other people. And if I could help, 2 people in the world, then my job is done. And allowing myself to do it that way was humongous. So then I was just putting an episode out whenever I had one, whenever I found somebody who I thought had an interesting story. So I wanted to include that because for the first at least year, I was just I would put one out sporadically, whenever I had one. And now I'm on obviously a consistent schedule every other week.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, I think it took me a while to feel, more confident, okay, I've got this and I can figure out these interviews and I can even maybe, plan a little bit less and let go of my outlines a little bit, I can shift easier. It's now after doing it. So my first episode came out in January of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, all right, all I have to do is show up, ask a question, stay curious, be kind, all of those things I know I can do. So I feel confident now, but it took me a while.
Yeah. A lot of people that I speak with, and I think this is just part of the creative process for a lot of people that are creators, right? Is this kind of this fear factor, wanting to make something perfect, this chasing perfection notion. So I want to stay there a little bit because, for people that may be listening to this that have an idea, but it's just, taking something from concept to reality, when you feel like you have to make it perfect, that you're not, maybe there's a little imposter syndrome there where if you release something that has some flaws, or whatever, that's not exactly what you want it to be, that it's not worthy of releasing. So, you spoke a little bit about just kind of like a letting go process. So, elaborate on that a little bit more, maybe some insight, for people listening here today, just that idea of chasing perfection and how to get through that. Yeah.
Well, perfectionism is definitely something that I work on a lot. I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. It's an insecurity, really. It's a huge insecurity. What will people think?
Mm-hmm.
What will people think who have known me as one thing? And now I'm creating this podcast, this platform for me to speak on. And, who do I think I am? There's so much insecurity. Therefore I have to create this thing that sounds absolutely perfect so people won't question or judge or whatever that is. And just recognizing what it's about and, what the insecurity is about. And understanding that of course I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm a one-woman show and, I literally do everything myself. And especially in the beginning, how could I possibly know? How could it possibly sound perfect? I don't know what I'm doing. All of these skills are completely new to me. All of the technology is completely new to me. It would be impossible for it to sound like an NPR produced show. That's crazy to worry about. Not crazy to worry about, but it's, it's silly. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But also I have this through working with coaches a lot too. Like I have this outlook on life that I'm always saying out loud into myself. Life is my learning journey. Like I'm just gathering information. So everything I'm doing, all the mistakes I'm making, okay, great. That's great information to take into next time. I won't do that again, or I will do that again. And when I think about it that way, when I remind myself like, no, this is my learning journey, somehow it's a lot easier to let go of the stuff that isn't perfect or great, but it's still a struggle. I've never liked having my picture taken. And, part of this is like putting your face out there. And, so all of this for me has been a huge learning journey, and also just kind of saying things to myself like, well, that's what I look like. And that's great. Like, that's okay. Or this is what I sound like. This is what my voice is, Sometimes I screw up, and so does everybody. And
Totally.
just like, also like listening, I listen to so many podcasts, and I'm able to, I'm sure you do this too. Like I hear all the mistakes that all the podcasts make.
Yeah.
And there's so many highly produced podcasts out there with teams of people that are making mistakes and that the sound isn't great. And somehow, not that I want everyone to suffer, but it humanizes everybody. It like reminds me that there are human beings behind all of those shows, and that humans make mistakes, and that's okay. And people are so forgiving. And honestly, most of the people listening don't even notice.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if that answered your question.
For me, because when I got started in podcasting, I would have never even envisioned that I would ever get into podcasting. Again, like as I mentioned in the intro, like my own journey came out of like really a very painful time I was going through. And there was, out of this healing process manifested this whole now podcasting side of my life. And it's, growing into like I produce, a few podcasts, and now I've got this software, and it's really, this whole thing side of my life has taken shape. And so, for me, I think what everything boils down to has been a journey of emotional courage. I had to like take a leap of faith and say, I'm like kind of what you were saying, like, I'm really just doing this for myself. And if I only kind of like help one or two people by sharing my story, that it's all worth it. But that process of like putting myself out there, getting out of the comfort zone, just showing up, when, like all the anxiety and the fear is there, but just the act of showing up has really informed for me a lot about myself and what I'm capable of. And it's given me a tremendous amount of confidence. So, I'm sure you would echo the same sentiment, like for anybody listening that's thinking about getting started, just take the step. Take the step.
Yeah. And I think that you touched on something really important, which is the difference between doing it for other people versus doing it for yourself, like having a really clear reason why you're starting the podcast, and reminding yourself of that as you go, and especially as you're starting, because, if you're doing it just to please other people, or to, to create something that you think other people are going to like, it's going to be a lot harder to, I think it's going to be a lot harder to show up and to be courageous, as you said, than if you're like, no, I'm doing this because I believe in it so much, because it's something that I know is needed, or I need it. It's going to be a lot easier to create, to show up, to be courageous, to take that first step, to overcome the perfectionism, and to just keep doing it and keep at it. You 100%. Just showed up. I can see your face now.
Oh, here I am. See, all you got to do is show up, everybody.
Yeah.
So, another thing too, another huge hurdle that you may have had to overcome. I know I definitely had to overcome it. Is like when you get started and you launch it, and now you're looking at your stats. Like, we use Buzzsprout to distribute our episodes, and so then you look at the stats, and it's like, so much passion behind this one episode, but over the first 30 days, there's only been 100 listeners. Like, you know, where are you at with, well, I guess let me ask this way. What would be your advice for people that, you know, may look at those numbers and possibly get discouraged? Like, you know, what do those numbers mean to you, first of all? And how would you kind of process through that to keep going?
Oh God. This is such a complicated question for me, I think. When I first put my podcast out, it was weird. Like I immediately for the first, I don't know, year had like a few hundred downloads per episode, like just right off the bat. And which is really unusual. And
That's pretty
then
good,
I
yeah.
took pretty not bad. And then I took a break and it just and you know, they say like don't stop because you'll lose listeners and download. And that is true. So it took it kind of tanked and now I'm rebuilding and I'm getting back up there and I think I'm gaining people who really actually are interested in the topic. So I think there's a huge difference in listenership. In terms of the numbers for me and the downloads, it can be really, really discouraging. And I have moments and days where I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like, this is so much work. What am I killing myself over this for? Because it is a ton of work, which brings me back to, like, you better have a really good reason as to why you're doing this. Because if you don't, you will not last. Like, you won't keep going. You will quit.
Oh, yeah. I think the stat is, like, you know, most fail within the first year. And, like, you know, even after that first year, it's just, it goes down. Like,
yeah, I think I heard, like, most podcasts don't make it past 5 episodes. And, like, the number of podcasts, maybe I'm wrong. You probably know this better than me, but, like, the number of podcasts that are considered as like active or whatever, you had to have put out more than 5 episodes or more than 8 episodes and like something within the last 90 days. Which means if you take a break for the summer, you're an inactive podcast. But yeah, it's, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I think like just to like really like hit that point home though, like you really have to have like a true purpose and really believe in it and yourself. And, you know, whenever I'm having moments of like, look at my number, like, what am I doing? You know, not enough people are listening or whatever. How do I get more people? And then I rethink everything. And then I think, okay, well, do I still believe in what I'm doing? And the answer is always yes, because I fully believe in what I'm doing. And that keeps me going. Like, I fully believe in what I'm doing. I think what I'm making is great or the best that I can be. But also I keep pushing myself to get better and learn more and, you know, shift. Like, if you listen to my show from episode 1 to today, it's a totally different format. Topic is still the same and the point is the same, but a completely different format, different length, everything. And I think the point is that, you know, keep learning, keep growing, keep pushing. But just keep checking in to make sure that you still actually care and believe in the thing that you're trying to put out. And like, yeah, if you're just putting a podcast out there because you want to like hear yourself talk, I don't know. Good luck.
And I think you really, you know, the point I'm hearing that you're getting across is it's a process and it evolves. And, you know, there's going to be, you know, hurdles and you're going to get discouraged and then you're going to get really encouraged, and it's just this kind of like, you know, continuous cycle. But that's normal. Like, don't get overwhelmed by it. It's just normal. But anyway, so you mentioned, you know, that you listen to quite a few different podcasts. What do you listen to? What do you like?
I mean, it changes. But okay, so obviously How I Built This and Armchair Expert. I like to listen to news. Like, I start my day every morning with the Daily, from the New York Times, and other like news shows from Crooked Media and stuff like that. I love true crime. Like, I like it all. I love Lemonada Media. I don't know if you know the stuff that they're doing, but they're doing some amazing shows. But I also love, I'm a life coach, so I also love the psychology stuff. So like the Brené Browns and the Adam Grants of the world.
Yeah.
The 10% Happier and those types of podcasts. I know I'm missing some like favorites right now, and
you can go find out, check out Molly's site. She'll post, what she's listening to. But like looking back, like what do you have, or can you remember, like what's been your favorite episode or guest or quote or kind of memory that you have, with your podcast?
Oof, that's so hard. I've had so many good ones. Mostly I think, okay, here's one thing about my show, and I can't remember if I was telling you this or not, or who I was telling this recently, but I do preliminary interviews, as you know, because I've had you on my show.
Mm-hmm.
Not out yet, but I do preliminary interviews, and I a lot of the times when I'm like preparing to get on a call with somebody or preparing to do a recording with somebody, sometimes I'm like, I just don't feel like doing this, or I don't think I'm going to like this person or something, like I just like, I get tired, or I'm like, I have too many things to do. I don't want to do this right now. And then every single time I get off the phone with somebody or recording with somebody, I'm like blown away, because I find everybody fascinating and everybody has something to say and something important to contribute to the world. And especially like, when I'm asking very specific sort of challenging or empowering questions to them, like everybody has something interesting about themselves. And I love being able to pull that out of people. Like, I think that's like what I'm good at and what is my specialty. And so I don't know, I love everybody, but I don't know. Okay, let's see. One of my favorites recently was, we were talking about it with Caressa. And she is a woman, wasn't it you? Maybe it was somebody else. This woman, Caressa, and she is, she lost all of her hair in her 40s. She had like this like gorgeous, like red, flowy, thick hair. And she's an actress in LA. And she lost all of her hair in her 40s. And learning about how she like dealt with that, like emotionally and just mentally, and how she overcame that. And also, what she's doing physically right now, and how that affected her relationships and her love life was like so good. I loved it. Wow. I also had my dad on like very, very early on.
Okay.
And that was, personal favorite. And my best oldest friend too, Melissa. She's also a Hollywood person. Oh, awesome. So that was a fun story.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your production process. So you mentioned now you're publishing every other week. So like, from concept to finding guests, booking them, putting the whole thing together, like what is your production process like? And do you do this full time, or are you also balancing, this podcasting life that you have with, regular job and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, I do this along with, building a coaching practice and speaking practice and all that stuff. So it's a lot. And I've taken some detours, did some podcast production along the way. And as far as my process goes, I now at this point kind of batch record. So I'll have like, a week or 2 weeks where I'm just kind of I'm doing a bunch of preliminary interviews and actual interviews. And then I stop doing that for a few weeks while I edit all of those episodes and publish them. Yeah. Yeah. And then I have, I edit in Descript, which is new since Grow the Show.
I love Descript. I just started using it. I think we've done maybe 1 or 2 episodes with the other podcasts. Love it.
And you're liking it?
Yeah. I mean, with the editing, it's pretty easy. The AI tools, like it'll generate audiograms and TikTok and stuff like that. So it can really cover a lot of bases for us.
Yeah. I didn't like it at first. And
I think a lot of people, there's some, it's a new software and it's had some quirks and,
Yeah. So. And it's massive. So it's like, it might slow down your computer and like, I hear the fan running. But I figured it out. Like I have to like upload my video and then just sort of let it go for like it and just like not touch it for a day. So I have to like, think about like, okay, I'm going to edit tomorrow. So I'm going to upload it today. But then once it's all calmed down, so I don't, again, like still not a techie person over here. So once it's all calmed down and the fan has stopped running, I'm like, all right, it's go time. And then
Cool.
even just like my editing, I have, a very specific process where I like do like triple speed and just like go through and edit the actual I heavily edit my episodes.
Okay.
Like heavily. That's also part of me. Like I'm actually trying to let go of editing everything.
Well,
Part of
I've
the
found,
production
there's lots of different variations. Like, some podcasts I listen to and they're not edited at all. Like they're not scripted, edited. It's just a very off the cuff conversation. And those are cool. They work for those podcasts. And but I'm like you. I like to, I kind of go after a little bit more of a higher production value, and polishing to it. I just like that format personally.
Yeah, me too. It's just it's what I'd prefer to listen to. But yeah, there are tons of unedited, like very popular, successful podcasts out there. But yeah, for me, I'm like, no, but it's all under the same umbrella of perfectionism.
Yeah.
And control.
Yeah. But be yourself, be yourself
yeah.
with it. Like stay true to what feels good for you, for anybody just kind of like going through the process. Like if it feels good to you, then it's fine. It's going to work.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Yes, that's right. That's really good advice.
Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for, just being such a good friend so far. Like just the collaboration that we've had, having me on to your podcast. Thanks for coming on to my podcast. And again, this is really why I love being in this community. It really, I find it to be super sharing, super collaborative, and, everybody's driven with purpose and passion. And I love that. And I get inspired by everybody I get connected with and super inspired with what you're doing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me as your first guest. I'm honored. And I agree. This can be a really collaborative space. So just remember, like, you don't have to do it alone.
Lastly, where can people find and, get connected with you?
The best places are either my website, which is just mollysider.com. It's spelled like apple cider, but with an S, S-I-D-E-R. Or on Instagram, which is, my handle is at Molly at this age. Like I am this age, but Molly at this age.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Molly.
Yeah, thank you.
Molly Sider is the host of I Am This Age, the podcast proving it's never too late, you're never too old, so go do that thing you're always talking about. She's a certified professional life coach, speaker, and real-life changemaker in her 40s. Molly believes the most efficient way to create peace inside and out is by sharing stories and listening to others share theirs. Go check out Molly's podcast, I Am This Age, wherever you listen to podcasts, or read more about her on mollysider.com. Whether you're just starting out in podcasting or you've been at this a while and are looking to save time so you can focus on creating amazing content for your listeners, go check out Podtask, a podcast management and marketing platform designed by podcasters for podcasters. With Podtask's automated workflow management and AI-based marketing tools, you'll save time, sanity, and be better equipped to grow your podcasts. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Microphone.
Beyond the Microphone is produced and distributed by EIQ Media Group, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on entrepreneurship, overcoming adversity, stories of emotional courage, women's health, aging, and more.